Poštovani ljubitelji sporta, posebice borilačkih sportova, danas ovdje u studiju vezanom uz Sunset Sports Media Festival u Zadru imamo vrlo posebnog gosta. Riječ je o Stevenu Espinosi, predsjedniku Showtime Sportsa, jedne od najuglednijih američkih kabelskih televizija. Mr. Espinosa, welcome to Croatia, welcome to this festival. How did it happen?
Well, Pete Radovich, who I've worked with for the last 10 years, is a huge advocate for the country. Even before, I'm sure this festival was in the back of his mind for years, but he's been such a promoter of Croatia. I'm so proud of his roots that he's been talking to me for years about coming to visit. He comes back, and this opportunity came up, and I was happy to support Pete and experience Croatia, which I never had before, and it's a beautiful country, and it will definitely be back.
Now you are president of Showtime Sports, and you are making boxing matches and MMA matches visible on TV. How hard a job is that?
It's a bit of a strange job because in virtually every other sport, if you're a television executive and your network has rights, the league does the scheduling for you. So if you have, World Cup, you have UEFA, at some point the schedule gets handed to you, and you don't get involved. You don't have to talk to the Croatian team and the Danish team and get them to get together. Boxing doesn't have an organizational structure. There is no league, and so the network sort of has to do a lot of those jobs. So it's not just televising and marketing the events. As you say, it's getting very involved in actually trying to make fights happen and putting together a schedule. So in terms of how difficult it is, it's always been, very difficult just because there's, it's sort of imagine putting together the World Cup, but without any of the rules or the structure in place, or doing the Super Bowl without anything. So you have to negotiate where it is and what rules they're playing by and who gets marketed in what way, and then the money. So all of those go into those, and we have to do that every month for every fight that we put on. And it's harder. I'll tell you what makes it harder is social media. It's much more complicated to have big negotiations when there's a lot of social media going on about it, because then egos get involved and people insult each other, and one fighter says he's underpaid. It just adds a layer of complexity that didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago.
You studied law, and you were a successful lawyer, and now you are a sports executive. Does it help you?
Oh, absolutely. I recommend lawyers going to law school for everyone. Literally everyone, because what it does is it gives you a certain framework, a way of thinking about problem solving and trying to be analytical and take out the emotion and think about just not this deal, but if you do this, then what are the impacts down the line? So I think if we look at a lot of the leagues, the NBA is led by a former lawyer, in Adam Silver. David Stern, who was also a former lawyer. Roger Goodell. It's not uncommon, at least in the U.S., for those leagues, and it isn't a coincidence. It's basically because of this framework. It gives you an advantage of thinking strategically.
As a lawyer and agent, As a lawyer and agent, you represented Oscar de la Hoya and Mike Tyson. What was that experience like?
It was thrilling. I've been a boxing fan for all my life, and I watched them as a fan, for years before I had any idea. And Mike Tyson's just a few years older than me, but I was like everybody else. In the late 80s, I was in college, and he was coming up, the youngest heavyweight champion. And it would save up your money, buy the pay-per-view. It'd be over in 30 seconds because of a first-round knockout. But he was a legend. He was a superhero at the time. It never occurred to me that, 10 years later that I'd be working with him as his lawyer, and the same from De La Hoya. So it happened by happenstance, but it was very personally meaningful. They were more than just clients. They were people who had personal meaning to me even before I started working with them.
You probably have a lot of memorable moments with Mike Tyson. Tell us some of them.
Well, I remember one of the most memorable moments is when Mike Tyson got the face tattoo, because it was right before a fight. He was fighting Clifford Etienne, which I believe was Louisville or Memphis. I'm blanking right now. But I'd seen him all week, and then Wednesday I go to see him, and he's got a brand new face tattoo, and it's still covered with bandages. He has ointment on it, and I looked at him and I said, Mike, like, what did you do? He said, I got a face tattoo. Do you like it? And I said, well, yeah, but they're never going to let you fight with that. That's an open wound on your face. The commission, what? And he sort of shakes his head, and I could tell he's very confused. He's like, I never thought of that. I was like, yeah, you shouldn't get a tattoo on your face or anywhere else right the week of the boxing match. So we had to negotiate with the commission, and they were very skeptical. They didn't want to let the fight proceed. We convinced them to let it proceed, although if it started bleeding during the fight, they probably would have stopped the fight. But luckily, I think the fight went 45, 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds. I'm not sure Mike ever got hit once, and so we dodged a bullet.
But it was like $10 million risk.
It was. They could have said, no, you're not going to fight, and then he would have lost a $10, $12 million payday minimum, because he got the idea of getting a face tattoo.
I have just heard a very interesting story about Tiger story about your first contact with Mike Tyson.
Yeah, Mike was at having a party at his house, or had some people over, and he had a tiger, like the movie The Hangover. Like I think that was inspired by, this point. This is well before the movie, and the tiger scratched somebody, and it was pretty bad. And he called me and asked. He said, "What do I do? Like, do I give him money? Do I let him leave? Like, I don't want him to sue me." And so I was at home on Saturday night, and this is before email and all of that. So I typed something up really quickly. I'm lucky I wasn't out to dinner or had a couple glasses of wine, and I could still think straight. So I said, look, if you're going to give him some money, get him to sign something so you don't get sued, and then send him to the hospital, because it was pretty bad.
You are also very well known as a person, as an executive who arranged $300 million contract for Floyd Mayweather and his 6 boats.
I was, and it was risky at the time. I was.
Were you nervous when you were signing that contract?
Very much so. Like I thought it was the right deal, but I was 1 year into my career as a boxing executive. I started with Showtime, and I pitched the idea, and I thought, this is the right way to go. But at the time, it was the largest deal ever in sports for an individual athlete, and everyone thought it was a bad idea publicly. As soon as we signed an announcement, the press, almost without exception, said that it was a mistake, that I wasn't going to last as an executive, that I had, I'd gotten conned, that this this wasn't going to turn out well, and yeah, I was very nervous, but I knew deep down that this could work. I trusted Floyd in his commitment, what he was going to do. And the rest is history, literally.
What's the secret of success of Floyd Mayweather? Is it maybe social networking, social media?
Social media definitely played a big influence, and I don't think Floyd would have been as big as he is without social media. But I think part of it is, I think it's just not social media. I think there's 2 aspects of it. It is, one, being authentic. People know when something's fake or not. So if you're trying to portray an image that you're not, sooner or later people will find out. And Floyd, as outrageous as he is sometimes, that's authentic to him. And secondly, he understands his audience. He understands what they want, what interests them, like how to put together an event that people will be excited about, and how to create spectacles. Because, Floyd is so good, he didn't have a lot of competition. The fights themselves were pretty one-sided. But what he had the gift of doing is this huge spectacle, which even if the fight wasn't the most exciting, it was such a memorable event and a memorable night that everyone went home happy anyway.
What's your opinion about his money-spending lifestyle?
Look, he's got plenty of money. Look, the one thing that people don't understand, they see the social media and they don't understand, that there's more than that. He has a lot of real estate, both residential and commercial, a lot of investments. So yes, he's got houses, he's got cars, he's got jewelry, he travels nonstop. But at the end of this, look, his family is going to be very well taken care of because he has made some very smart investments.
As a sports executive in fighting sports as well, do you know some Croatian fighters that you like to watch?
Yeah, well, I watch a little bit of UFC and MMA coming up. Crow Cop is obviously one of the legends of the sport. Miocic is, another one who's very accomplished and exciting fighter. But I would say the one with the most potential nowadays is Hrgović, and he's still relatively young in his career. But if you ask me to sort of list the top young heavyweights, he would certainly be one of the top 2 or 3 young heavyweights, and within a couple years he could be at the top of the division.
Now he has an American coach. Will it help him to reach American market?
Absolutely. It's something a little bit unique about America. They're somewhat territorial, in some ways a little small-minded. They don't expand too much beyond their own measures. So in order to earn the love and respect of the U.S. audience, you have to spend some time there. Not just come in for a fight and then leave, but spend some time there, let people get to know you and see you, training there, and learning the language and spending time. It's a big country, it's a big market, but I think the key is yes, once he spends some time there, people are gonna know his name, and he'll capture that market, and then the sky's the limit.
At least you have to become half of American.
There's right, and even learning a little bit of English, spending some time there, but most of all, it's sharing your personality. It's hard we all know that sports are about emotions. At the end of the day, yes, it's a competition, but the reason why people are so involved is because there's an emotional attachment, and maybe it came from your father, or it came from your hometown, or your countrymen, or your national pride, but there's always an emotional attachment. And for someone like Hrgović to become popular in the U.S., like, people have to care about him emotionally and find out who he is as a person.
Mr. Espinosa, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope to see you in next year's coming for this festival as well.
Certainly the festival, and hopefully we can bring a big fight or two here in the near future too.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Štovani gledatelji, evo, to je bio naš susret sa jednim od najutjecajnijih ljudi u svijetu profesionalnog boksa, sa Stevenom Espinosom.